Think about the sentence, "I went to a restaurant." It is a complete thought, but as a story, it leaves a lot to be desired. This video shows a completely empty diner, and if you stop your story there, that is exactly the picture you paint for your listener. Predictable, routine, a little boring. Now add a detail. I went to the restaurant, but the kitchen closed early. Or, I went to the restaurant and had to return my food because they completely messed up my order. The core event, going to the restaurant, is exactly the same in every version, but those extra details shift the reality of the experience. They tell you if the trip was a success, a failure, or a struggle. In any complex situation, knowing only the main event gives you an incomplete picture. You need the modifying details to understand the truth of what actually happened. Medical billing relies on this exact same logic. When you look at a medical chart, the standard CPT procedure code acts as the main story. It says, "The doctor performed surgery." To supply the necessary plot twists, coders use modifiers. We start with a basic procedure code, represented by a simple square block. Then we add a modifier, a 2-digit code that attaches to the end of that main code. Attaching that tag physically changes the shape of the block, so it fits a completely new slot. Insurance companies process millions of claims, and they are not in the exam room to see how things went. Without those 2-digit modifiers to fill in the blanks, payers reject claims for lacking context, and providers do not get paid for their work. Imagine a baker preparing a massive wedding cake. Halfway through, the customer scales back the guest list, so the baker intentionally finishes a smaller dessert. This split-screen illustration shows exactly what happens in the medical field under Modifier 52. On the left is the towering wedding cake that was planned, and on the right is the smaller cake that was actually delivered. Modifier 52 stands for reduced services. Coders use it when a provider intentionally performs less work than originally planned. The whole plan changed by choice. Now imagine a different scenario. A contractor quotes you for a simple sink repair, but opens the cabinet to find hidden mold and broken pipes. This video of water violently bursting from underneath a kitchen sink shows exactly how a routine job transforms into a massive struggle. In medical coding, that unexpected chaos is captured by Modifier 22, which stands for increased procedural services. You add this to the main code when a surgery requires significantly greater effort, time, or technical difficulty than a baseline procedure. By simply looking at these 2-digit numbers, the payer immediately understands if the provider's workload shrank to half size or expanded into an all-day ordeal. Sometimes the story doesn't just change, it halts entirely. Watch this video. A roller coaster train starts the ride, but suddenly freezes halfway up the steep track. Red warning lights flash. The safety system detected a problem, and the operator killed the ride. Nobody wanted to stop, but safety comes first. This maps perfectly to Modifier 53, or discontinued procedure. You use this when a doctor starts a surgery, but has to abort the operation purely because the patient becomes unstable. It is crucial to understand the difference here. Unlike our baker who intentionally baked a smaller cake, Modifier 53 is never a planned reduction. It is an emergency stop. Adding this modifier protects the provider by documenting that the surgeon stopped the procedure to prioritize a human life. Things get particularly interesting when a patient has to return for more care. Think about getting your hair colored. The stylist applies color and tells you to come back next week for the final toner. This animated timeline shows that planned return. We start at the initial procedure node and follow a smooth arrow forward to an expected second appointment. This is Modifier 58, a staged or planned procedure. The return trip was anticipated from the very beginning. Contrast this with a contractor who fixes your plumbing, but rushes back because a pipe unexpectedly burst. Watch our timeline branch off with a jagged red line pointing back to the operating room. This is Modifier 78, an unplanned return due to a complication. A third variable, your contractor fixes the bathroom, but 2 weeks later, the garage door breaks, a totally unrelated visit. Notice a completely separate timeline appears below the first, showing a new, distinct node. This is Modifier 79, an unrelated procedure. Modifiers map the patient's entire timeline, explaining exactly why they returned for more care. They tell the story of the patient's journey far better than a list of tools or equipment ever could. There are many other twists you will encounter. Two master chefs cooking one meal together translates to modifier 62 for co-surgeons. A routine oil change where the mechanic suddenly discovers total transmission failure mirrors modifier 25, when a routine checkup reveals a massive, entirely different problem that needs its own immediate attention. Look at the bold question on the screen. What changed in the story? This is the ultimate question every medical coder asks themselves when they sit down to read a patient's chart. The core principle is simple. If the provider did exactly what the main code describes, with no extra work, no emergencies, and no unexpected returns, then nothing changed. If nothing changed, you don't need a modifier at all. Modifiers function as a targeted alert system. They sit quietly until a deviation from the norm occurs, raising a flag to explain the new context. The standard procedure code is your baseline script. It represents the ideal scenario where everything goes exactly according to plan. But healthcare involves human beings, and plans change. Modifiers capture the real-life plot twists. They track patient safety, secure accurate documentation, and verify that providers receive fair payment for the specific work they performed. Medical billing relies heavily on precise numbers, but those numbers are simply a vocabulary. Your job is to use them to accurately translate life's unexpected surprises.